it's a really exciting time for this company because we are, one of the first advanced nuclear designs that are getting licensed in the country. And so this is a really cool moment in our history.
Welcome to Talk Tuesday, a webinar series where we explore what it takes to kickstart new projects, launch new products, and create the right conditions for team success. I'm Eric Borman, founder of Wiley, an agency that helps teams innovate faster with less risk through our sprint workshops and training. We help teams get aligned, eliminate unproductive meetings, and make rapid progress using our interactive, repeatable sprint workshops. Skill up with our training at wearewiley.com. And now to our guest. It's now my great pleasure to introduce my very special guest and friend, Emily Young, Lead Engineering Instructional Specialist at TerraPower. Hey, Emily, welcome.
Hey, Eric. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. So you and I have known each other for some time now. We're friends, and our spouses are friends. And actually, so through Duke Energy, the little incestuous world that is Duke Energy, we all kind of connected there. You guys are all coworkers. And I think just an incredible thing about you that I'm really excited to share with our audience is that you're super authentic. You speak the truth, even when it's unflattering to yourself, which I find hilarious and refreshing. And you just put off like a generally a good energy out into the world. So again, I'm really excited to be interviewing you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric.
So we're going to dive into all things TerraPower at the moment. But first, please share a little bit about yourself, Emily, and then maybe a little bit about the professional journey you took before you started TerraPower.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It is so great to connect back with you and see you again after all this time. But basically a little bit about myself is I grew up in Colorado, went to Purdue in Indiana for college, decided I wanted to be an engineer like my dad. And while I was there, for some reason, decided that nuclear engineering sounded really interesting and exciting. So I stayed at Purdue for 6 years, did my undergrad and master's there in nuclear engineering, met my husband. We started dating then, and then he moved to Charlotte, and that's where we, connected with you, Eric, and Chelsea. And, we, he worked at Duke Energy doing nuclear engineering, fuels work, and then I ended up working there again as well. So we worked on the same floor, actually, together. So I know a lot of people don't think they could work with their spouses, but we loved it. After about 6 years at Duke, I decided that I wanted to see what I could do in pursuing advanced nuclear in the future of the nuclear industry, especially nuclear power. And so I started looking at companies that were involved in these types of projects, and that brought me to TerraPower in 2020. So moved here during COVID, came out to Seattle. It was a pretty small company at the time, and now it's grown immensely since I started. And I do work to make sure that people are safe, and that when we design nuclear power plants, that they're operating safely and to protect the health and safety of the public. So it's a really awesome, exciting job. It's an exciting time in the industry, and I'm really excited to talk more about it. And before we get too far into it, I definitely want to make sure to state that what we talk about today are my views alone, and that I'm not representing the company. And I also, of course, will not disclose any information that's not readily and publicly available. So
Gotta have the legalese to cover your head, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that. And yes, definitely curious about your take on the landscape of nuclear as well as TerraPower. So for those that are unanointed or maybe unaware of TerraPower, what is TerraPower, and why should people be, purely pay attention to them?
So TerraPower is a company that is involved in advanced nuclear technology. So we have projects spanning nuclear reactor design and development, and then also nuclear isotopes for medical purposes. So it's a really cool, exciting company that really is expanding the technology in nuclear. Specifically, the work that I've been mostly involved with is in developing a new advanced nuclear reactor in the United States, which just broke ground recently. So yes, it's really exciting. It's called the Natrium Reactor, and it actually is going to be in Wyoming. So we can talk more about that. But the really cool thing about TerraPower is we are one of these companies that is really trying to pursue what the future of this industry looks like and really support carbon-free emissions in our electricity generation to help us get to our zero carbon targets as a country. So it's a really exciting time for this company because we are, one of the first advanced nuclear designs that are getting licensed in the country, and so this is a really cool moment in our history as a company. And this is my cat.
Awesome. It wouldn't be a proper interview without an
Yeah,
appearance from cat. I love it. It's perfect. I can't remember which one is it.
this is Luna.
Yeah.
Okay, Luna.
I remember Luna back when she was in Charlotte.
Yep.
So you mentioned a couple of things. Yeah, I mean, it's a really big deal for the industry, but it's a big deal for our country and really the world, I would posit. And we're going to come back to that thread because we need to. I think it's worth spending some time there and really talk about like what this means. But I'm curious. You mentioned starting early on and the organization in TerraPower and how it's changed. Can you talk to us a little bit more about like those early days? What was the culture like then, and maybe how has it evolved as the company's grown?
Sure. Yeah, it's a really interesting timeline. So I started in November of 2020, and about a week after I accepted my offer, we got this really big award from the Department of Energy called the ARDP, the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. And that award was basically the Department of Energy committing to trying to advance nuclear power in this country. And it was really exciting. So TerraPower got awarded it. And at that point, we just took off in terms of growth as a company. So I got there right at the early stages. When I applied, there's only 2 positions open, and one of them had the same background as what I had. So it was really exciting. But then maybe a couple months after I started, our career page was just blowing up with positions, and we were hiring a lot of people. We were staffing up in support of this major ARDP project. One thing I'm really impressed about with this company is they've always had really strong guiding principles in how we interact with each other and work as a team in a respectful environment. And we are working with really, intelligent people, the smartest people around the world in this technology. So, it's a really exciting place to learn and get to see, the cutting edge in the technology. So, as I started, it was a little bit more what I'd say kind of a research and development type company, doing a lot of, designs to see what the next best thing was and try to find the right one. And that's what they submitted to the ARDP. And ultimately, that's what's leading us down this path with the Natrium design. So that mindset is shifting a little bit to more of a production environment now because we are actually designing something that will be operating in the future. So there certainly is a shift in perspective that's happening. But this company really is engaging with a lot of the industry companies that are in nuclear power already to facilitate learning, what's been done already and make sure that we're heading down the right path and, making this a successful project because it does have so much influence on what the future of this industry looks like. So we're all really committed to getting it done and getting it done right. So that's kind of the growth and evolution of where we're at today. So, and as you mentioned earlier, we broke ground on this project. So now we're almost entering another phase of our work where we're actually hands-on, doing stuff regarding that design and construction phase for that reactor.
And you mentioned a couple times, just for the audience, is it ARDP? Is that the right?
Yeah, so that's the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Project out of the Department of Energy.
Perfect. Thank you. And yes, like, let's keep going there. Like, I mean, we've touched on it a couple times already, but it's kind of hard to, overstate the importance of this technology. I mean, climate change is just a daunting challenge for humankind. Net zero goals are just tremendously, just a huge looming goal that we have to really take some serious steps to reach if we're going to be serious about this, which we really need to be. So talk to us about like, what does this mean for, if this project is successful, what does it mean for the industry and by extension, what does it mean for the energy sector and its impact to climate?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it is an interesting and exciting time to see all this commitment to these net zero goals, right, that we're seeing. And, as a power industry, in my opinion, the best thing we can do is try and have diversity in how we're generating electricity. And that's where nuclear becomes really pivotal because it is what we call a base load power, which means it's always on, it's always reliable. These plants, you basically turn them on and they're operating for a year to 2 years at a time. And so that reliable energy source is so important to have in addition to other sources of carbon free energy, such as solar and wind, which, may be less reliable if you have a cloudy day. So that's where like I think it plays a role in the future is we have to lean on these different technologies together. It's not one answer fits all, right? And so that's where I see kind of the future headed is finding ways to put nuclear into this story and try to find ways to make it work more efficiently with these other types of sources of power. And so that's actually one really exciting thing about this Natrium design is it does have a flexible operation strategy where it can maneuver to meet the demands and the current other resources that are on the grid so that it can, be sure to be available to get whatever it needs and accommodate those varying sunny days and windy days um, as they come. So
Because it
that's
has
what
a
I think.
storage
Yeah.
component to it, right?
Hmm?
It has this energy storage component to the project, right?
Right, right. So that's how they're going to do flexible kind of operation is this energy storage. Think of it as a giant battery attached to it that can ramp up when there's a lot of people using power like at night, or ramp down whenever the sun is shining and the wind is blowing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've been following TerraPower as I'm a nerd like that, but I'm in the project, but I did not realize the battery component. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really neat design. I think it will be really interesting to see how it can integrate with the current grid. And then, you also see facilities that, are like manufacturing facilities, future data centers. You never know, like they're gonna have their energy supply needs. And so, the questions and discussions are now evolving to how does nuclear play into meeting those demands. I was just recently at the North American Young Generation in Nuclear Conference where I saw you. And that was a really big topic of discussion was, how nuclear, may play a role in these future demand needs as artificial intelligence becomes a bigger impact to the world, where we have data center that are just sucking up energy that we need to find some sort of generation source for. So it's an interesting time to see that now nuclear is part of that discussion, whereas in the past it might have been a cheaper option, such as natural gas, just put a natural gas plant nearby and make it work. But, with the carbon goals, that's not necessarily going to be the best option anymore.
I heard that Texas has actually considered regulations to potentially limit or control data centers for that very reason, the energy consumption. And we've heard, obviously, that it's its own grid and separate from the rest of the,
Yeah.
nation, but still, to your point, it just kind of highlights that point of the energy consumption. AI, yeah, it's consuming what I think I heard 5 times as much as a typical search request. The AI.
Yeah.
Just,
Wow. I don't know the specifics,
oh,
but
it's
I
just
think you see the
unheard of.
projections. Yeah, it's only going up, which, before AI was a thing, I think that you would hear that the future energy demand projections weren't necessarily on the increase, but now that this is like become such a big movement in technology, it feels like it's kind of shifting that perspective a little bit.
I'm wondering if you can touch a little bit more on the culture and how, I mean, it's exciting for those of you that have ever been in a startup. It's pretty exciting, and I can only imagine what the level of excitement you probably had joining TerraPower with an amazing team on the cutting edge of tech. What was that culture like? What was the, I guess I'll just leave it there. What was the culture like then? And obviously, you have to grow up at some point, and that's a sign of
Yeah.
success. But naturally changes happen. And I'm just curious, like, what's been your take on how it's grown and what the culture has, how have cultures changed over time?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And like the one answer I can say that's been the constant over time that I see is passion and excitement about this technology. I mean, everyone that I think works in this industry is very excited about it, especially in times like today where you see, you hear a lot in the past about the renaissance of like, well, we're going to build a lot of new nuclear power reactors and it's going to be so awesome, but then it just kind of never happens. When I was graduating college, it just was like, okay, your job now is to be responsible for maintaining the existing plants and making sure that they don't close down early so that we can rely upon them. So that was, fun, I guess. But now these days we see companies like mine and a lot others across the country and in the world that are committing to advancing this technology. So, I think that's just raised the interest and passion and excitement of all the people involved. And I can feel that, with my company and how we're moving forward. And I think we also, you know, working with the national labs, working with existing utilities, there's such a diverse background of people that are involved in this technology. And it's been really exciting to see the growth of bringing those people together, on a project for collaborating to make sure that we're all, moving towards the greater purpose and the cause, which is creating new nuclear power plants in this country and trying to find a way to do it so it's affordable so companies want to invest in them and, invest in this carbon-free future of our country.
Yeah, I always joke like the nuclear industry is in the hands of the civil engineering industry. Without the two working together, you can't bring projects to life. And
Right.
those interdisciplinary, the glue and the way that those disciplines work together really matters.
Oh yeah, and even just think of the whole fuel cycle, right? There's mining of uranium, there's processing it and enriching it and fabricating it into these fuel rods that then we use to take heat out of to, power and create steam. So, there are so many impacted industries that are involved in this, production, and it's really exciting to see where that's going to move it forward. And if you look online, you'll see a lot of discussion about this natrium plant being in Wyoming, and it's at the site of a retiring coal plant, which is really awesome to see the community around there now, embracing the change from, going to be a working person at a coal plant versus going to be a working person at a nuclear plant and what that shift would look like, and how it's going to impact that surrounding area, will be really interesting to see and see how it grows and develops people there, in this new field of work.
So switching gears a little bit,
Mhm.
you had recently a beautiful baby boy, Jamie, and I can attest he's actually quite a cutie. Usually you call babies cute, and sometimes that's a lie, but no, this time it's real. Can attest. How has work changed for you since the birth of Jamie?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that he is cute. um, so I didn't get too much into my role, but before I had Jamie, I was an engineer, and then I became an engineering manager for a couple of years. And then right before I had him, I changed into this lead instructional specialist role, to try and find ways to develop my career and understanding further of different areas of our company. So it was interesting in that, like, I was pregnant at the time and deciding to go through a career change, which is, um, you know, challenging in and of itself, but it's been really exciting. I think, I have to be a little bit more thoughtful in managing my time and being very intentional that I want to be present with him when I'm around him, and I want to, be focused on him and his development and what he's learning, and not miss that opportunity. So, it definitely has been a shift because it was really easy at times to be like, oh, I can just get this done in another hour, and then it's 7 p.m. and I forgot to eat dinner, but now it's like I have a hard stop at 4, when my childcare ends. But it's kind of nice because it gives me more time to reflect and have a fresh brain going into work the next day, so I'm not so spiral and spun up about a topic for hours and hours and hours. And I think that's like really healthy to have that balance. And so maybe having the baby kind of forced me into it, but I love it. I'm enjoying it so much. And I'm, really happy that we did it and that my company has been really great in supporting me through this new chapter of my life.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that things are working out really well for you too, and I'm super glad that his looks took after you, Emily, and that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I know.
Good job to Jason. Um, so I'm curious, what are you kind of most excited about? You can take that wherever you want. I mean, of course, we can take that in the context of TerraPower, but feel free to take it where you want. What's really exciting to you right now?
I think in this industry, I'm just so excited about the future and like where we're headed, and that nuclear is becoming more of a conversation and people are getting more interested in it and trusting of the technology. I think, it's definitely a technology that sounds scary, and I think we've seen a lot of examples in the past that, can drive perception on, this technology and the word nuclear. And so I think I'm really excited to see how that perception has been changing, even in just like the public. Like, I'm not nervous about going out and telling people I'm a nuclear engineer anymore. I think most people are really excited, and it could just be because I'm in Seattle and people seem really interested in it. But um,
You're not a
it's
closeted nuclear engineer anymore.
I know. Yeah, I'm not a closet nuclear engineer anymore. Um, so I think like it's just that is so exciting. And then also, I just think seeing all these different countries around the world committing to reducing their carbon footprint, and seeing how nuclear is going to become like this global topic, which it already, of course, has a presence globally, but it's just going to continue to expand, as we see more affordable access to the technology, and you know more ways that it can be placed in different locations that might not have to be near a major body of water. There's a lot of really cool opportunities for where the future is headed. So I think that's definitely where I'm really excited.
Awesome. What are you like really curious about right now? Are there anything that you're kind of pursuing or exploring at the moment?
Well, for me personally, I I'm kind of a professional development junkie. um, I'm always reading books, trying to understand ways to be a better leader, a better manager. I'm not a manager right now, but I am a lead, so I have to find ways to still inspire people and, create this collaborative and productive environment. So, I find myself reaching towards some professional development books. I'm usually reading a couple books at a time, like a fun book, a professional development book, and like maybe something else about trying to expand my knowledge on like the energy markets and stuff. So, I think just having that kind of drive to see what the what gaps I have that like I want to work on, and so that's where I focus my extracurriculars, I guess.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with you. I tend to dabble in different books at the same
yeah.
time.
I'll say too, attending your decision sprint training was super awesome because I love, I find myself, we have a lot of priorities. We have a lot of commitments that we're trying to meet, and at times it can become overwhelming as like the work starts piling up. And so hearing you kind of help frame like a productive way to make a decision, and like different charts of like impact versus like the reach that you're trying to do of like what you're trying to make a decision, that mindset has helped me a lot too, because just sometimes like in my engineering brain I just need to be able to write something on paper and see exactly like, you know okay, let me think through this a little bit more methodically. So I really appreciated that course that you had. I thought it was really valuable to me.
Well, thank you
um
for saying that.
yeah.
That makes my day actually. It really does. That's awesome. Okay, well, so I have a couple more questions for you. You know, I'm curious about your take on what the ideal conditions are for team success. I mean, you've worked with different teams at Duke, different roles now. What do you think are kind of the right ideal conditions to ensure teams are successful?
I think that's a really good question, and there's probably a million ways that you could have a successful team just depending on who you're working with. My personal style is I like to create like a very trusting environment where we understand each other's values, and really lean on the strengths of each individual on the team. So what do you like to do, what do you want to do, and how can I as a lead help you find tasks that line up with that, is how I try to influence a group. And then honestly, I think having really clearly established goals and the bigger picture and milestones is like the most important thing ever. Helping a group of people understand what they're working towards helps motivate, or it motivates me. And I think it does motivate others too when they see like, if I drop the ball here, what are the upstream or downstream impacts that may have? Okay, and then they'll try and find alternatives if they get stuck into challenges, or they'll be a little bit more proactive in ensuring that even if they can't get it done how we originally thought, like perhaps they can find another way to still meet the same goal with a different product. So I think to me those are the most important things in creating a successful team.
I love that. Those are great answers. What do you think are some of the biggest hurdles um, in the way of the nuclear industry writ large?
Well, I think again, at this NAYGN conference I was at recently, you hear a lot about money and cost, and how expensive it is to build a nuclear power plant, and how difficult it is for companies to put up that money, at the beginning when they have a, non-existent product. And, for us, right, we've never built a reactor like this before. And so that is tough, right? And so budget is tough. And we've also seen a couple of reactors recently come online in this country that went way over budget. And so I think there's a little bit of hesitancy to kind of see how this goes before making a full on commitment. And, I did hear some people say that, at this conference I was at. So, cost certainly is probably one of the larger factors in this. And then, I think you hear a lot of people talk about waste and waste disposal for nuclear being a challenge. And it is certainly a challenge. And right now, operating nuclear plants are storing waste on site, which is fine, but is that the best option moving forward? Probably not. So there probably needs to be some growth in that arena. But at least what we're doing today is still safe and effective. So I don't think it's as much of a hurdle as trying to find billions of dollars to fund a project like building a nuclear reactor is. So those are, I think, the bigger risks that I see for our industry.
Hopefully, we can reprocess some of that waste into other useful products to do in other parts of the world.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Come on, Congress. What would your colleagues say are your greatest superpowers, Emily?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people see me as a unique engineer in that I'm pretty outgoing and I like talking to people and I like getting to know people and I think that stands out a little bit. And so I think it also helps build a really great environment between teams and collaboration. And so I think people can probably see that my superpower is making strong personal connections and then using that to create like a really functional working environment between teams. So
I concur. And now I said at the beginning, but I'll say it again. I mean, you're authentic. Like, if you don't fall in love with Emily when you meet her, there's something wrong with you. It's you, not her. Like,
yeah, yeah.
but she's true blue, genuine. And I think, again, you're hilarious, super thoughtful, kind, and an amazing host. I could go on and on. It's been so delightful. So it's been so delightful to talk to you. One final question for you. How can people learn more about TerraPower and keep up with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of really great social media content. Mainly LinkedIn is kind of where a lot of me and my coworkers like to see the news articles that come out and get reposted by TerraPower on LinkedIn. We also have a website, terrapower.com, that has a lot of great resources if you want to learn more about all the different projects. I focused a lot on the one I'm the most familiar with, which is this Natrium project in Wyoming, but we have a lot of other work going on at the company that's super awesome. I briefly mentioned it, like medical isotope technology is really great, how that can impact cancer in the future. So it's a great company. Definitely check it out. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow me. It's a fun time for our industry.
I'm going to follow TerraPower after this conversation on LinkedIn. If you're curious, audience, about attending the Decision Sprint training, our next one is on July 30th, the one that Emily mentioned. We go to wearewiley.com and check that out. Emily, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time for us. This has just been a highlight of my week, probably my month. Thank you so much for taking time.
Oh, thank you. It's always good to catch up, Eric, and I do miss our dinner party, playing heads up and all that fun stuff. So we'll have to virtual hang soon.
Yeah, and we need to get our butts out there to see you on the West Coast at some point. So
yeah.
Well, thanks, Emily.
Right.
See you next time.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
I'm Jake Knapp, and I'm the creator of the Design Sprint process. I'm the author of this book, Sprints, and I am here at the Wiley offices in Charlotte, North Carolina. This right here, if you were thinking about maybe doing a design sprint with Wiley, this is where you would be, at this table, probably, unless you do it at your office, which is totally an option, but right here in this space with a whiteboard, with a bunch of paper and pens. Basically, they're going to help you think through the problem, get it started, and get a solution tested really rapidly. That's the whole idea with a design sprint. I'd highly recommend, if you're thinking about it, that you do give Wiley a chance to your project. I've worked with these folks a couple times, and they always exceed my expectations. I always do things a little bit better than I could have imagined ahead of time. They're also really nice. So don't tell them I told you that. I try to, keep it cool, but they're super nice people. Anyway, best of luck to you, and try Sprint.